ask each of our speakers to do self-introductions. And the main reason for that is that I don't like those rather belabored introductions where people tell you about their confirmation dates and baptismal records and, you know, where they went to school and all that kind of good stuff. So they know what's important about them. And these two speakers are really super knowledgeable about the topic, which is focused in on automation and more particularly RPA technologies. And I'm really excited to hear what they have to say because there's a real shortage of useful case studies about how people have actually used these technologies, and that's what they're going to focus on today. So Heather and Scott, let me ask you to introduce yourselves. Again, there is a question tab. Please do not hesitate to use it. I will keep an eye on it, and I will go on mute and allow them to take it away. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, John. I am the Vice President of Intelligent Automation here at Konica Minolta. Prior to being here, I was a CIO at Columbia University, and more recently, I do a lot of consulting with government and higher ed in the use of automation and transformation technologies. Scott?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Heather. My name is Scott Money. I'm the Director of Operations with DocPoint Solutions, and I've spent pretty much my whole life in the content management arena, which has turned into many opportunities with automation, both in our commercial sectors and especially on the federal side where we spend most of our time. So looking forward to this session and getting started. Heather, we've been on several other webinars together. This is the first time I'm officially your sidekick, though, so I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, there's no better sidekick than you, but don't tell my others that I said that. So today we're going to describe automation. I know some of you in the audience may not have heard of RPA. So we'll describe it really quick to give everybody a baseline of knowledge. And then the main focal point of this session is going into the three use cases: employee onboarding, customer call center, and supply chain. And we're actually going to show you a bot in action for employee onboarding. And then we're going to wrap it up with best practices. How do we scale? Where do we start? So let's start with what is robotic process automation. So picture somebody in a finance department of an agency who has to log into a system and download a bunch of invoices and do a bunch of manual tasks across other systems to verify those invoices and process them. Any task where a human is logging into some kind of system and entering a bunch of data and swivel chairing, probably heard that term before, where they then have to go look at another system to finish the work in this system. That is something that a bot can do. It's done on an interface level. So the bot logs in just like a human. And as long as that process is repeatable and rule-based, it's something that can be automated. So bots do copy, paste, submit forms, compare data, make rule-based decisions. They instantly execute without error. So there's a 10% error rate in every process. Think about the cost of those errors, the downstream reverberation impact of those errors. And of course, they work 24/7, 7 days a week. Well, it's probably more like 22 hours with, downtime and things of that nature. But they pretty much work around the clock. And the stats around the return are staggering. 30% productivity increase at agencies that are automated, 0% error rate. As long as we can program the bot to do exactly what it's supposed to do, there are no errors. Given that they work around the clock, they are doing about 3 to 5 times the work of a human. For every $1 you invest in automation, you generally get back somewhere between $4 and $11 in worker productivity, meaning the human can be redeployed to something better. And I want to underscore that bots are not coming to take our jobs. Well, I don't know, maybe, in many, many years from now. But right now, statistically, RPA really is used to deploy humans to better uses, to better tasks.
Yeah, Heather, we hear that a lot on our calls with our customers and in all the spaces. It's a concern that comes up quite often. is this going to take my job? And really the answer to that is no. These are designed to complement and assist and streamline business processes. So, and a lot of them still require user interaction. They're not all fully automated. Sometimes we need that expertise from the business side to make certain decisions. So not here to take our jobs. You know, the whole AI conversation, that's another webinar. We'll address that in another session, but definitely something we hear about. So, but that's not really how we see it. You know, that's my general comment of that. We just wanted to cover that for the team.
And it doesn't happen that way. We don't see it. There's a phrase by one of our top platform providers. They say, if you hate it, automate it. And what good is a human's time if all they're doing is copying and pasting and not thinking or interacting with citizens that are calling into the agency and need, you know, help or advice? All right, let's go into our first use case, employee onboarding. There is not one agency, you know, that has a good size workforce that does not have this problem that we are about to describe. And it is onboarding. It is bringing on new employees into an organization. What I'm showing you here right now is a heat map for the HR function overall. So we're going to talk about one use case, HR onboarding, but I want to point this out to you because we're going to send it to you after this session. And when you think about HR onboarding, you're going to say, well, can we automate this and can we automate that as well? So use this as a guide. Anything in orange is low-hanging fruit. It's being automated all the time. The things that are darker color are more complex. Not necessarily don't automate them, just, you know, wait until you're more mature and make sure there's enough ROI to go into it. But just want to point out this little graphic that will really help you later. All right, so why?
Just one quick note on those, Heather. These heat maps are super useful, and we do encourage our potential clients to take a look at this and just map out those easier things or the redundant tasks. And as you see in here, some of these are more complex, which would require that user action we were talking about earlier. So sorry to interrupt you there.
No, I need my wingman. Thank you. Okay, so employer onboarding is ripe for transformation. There are some stats that support the need to do this. More than 3/4 of leaders say that their onboarding practices don't work well in their organization. And I'm going to explain why in a few minutes. There's a very good reason why HR struggles with this. 12% of employees strongly agree that their organization doesn't do a great job of onboarding. And you know, that has an impact later on the employee's performance and their longevity. I know this is hard to believe, but there's an 82% increase in staff retention when a great onboarding program exists. I know it's a little hard to believe. We've got links down here and we're going to send this out so you can go follow up on your own. And HR is always trying to impress upon us how critical the onboarding experience is. And I'm here to support them and say they are absolutely right. 80% of HR professionals are planning to improve the hiring experience. So if you're thinking about it, you are right in line with your peers, and the time is now. And let's do this for our employees. They are 2 times more likely to look for a new job when they've had a negative onboarding experience. Is that amazing? Just that initial time.
It really is. And, you know, as we go through each one of these case studies, we're going to see, you know, items that are common in each one of these, how we're talking about different platforms. You know, an example here, when somebody's onboarded to an HR system, you know, are they going to go create an Active Directory user? No, absolutely not. They're not going to do that. That's not their role. But when we talk about tools to automate, you know, that would be something that sits maybe in the IT environment, and it's more of a polling interval that looks at the HR system and says, oh, there's a new employee, you know, it's for the IT division, and we need to create, you know, put a laptop order in, which some of the things you have here in your graphics, and on down the line, along with training. So it's not, it just helps to create a more cohesive solution, and onboarding obviously is a big one.
You know, Heather, I can't I can't resist commenting on this one. I said I would be quiet, but I can't help myself. Is that that 82% is so important. I saw a survey at some point that talked about particularly young people coming into organizations, and that the onboarding process in many of them led them to believe that they were walking into a computer museum, that you know, they had all this technology in college, all this technology in universities, and then they had the clunkiest process imaginable when they went to go for a job with somebody, and that impression lasted. And it just, your comment about the 82% is spot on, I think.
It's
That's
real. They
true.
say, what am I doing here? This place is low tech. I don't know if I should be here. It's real. Why is onboarding so difficult? I spent a lot of my time in the HR space with HR systems. We at QAI DocPoint, if there's anything we understand really well, it is all the systems that HR has to use. And there are good reasons why this is so tough. Look at this. You've got 5 different departments displayed here. And there's a list here of everything they've got to do. The average company has 18 systems that they have to go into. Even a small company, think about it. A new Outlook account, a Zoom or WebEx account, an SAP account or ERP account. You know, there's so many accounts, expenses, you know, travel accounts, learning systems, 28 items to coordinate, the new computer, the software on the new computer. And well, okay, I'm guilty as charged right here. I'm about to hire someone. And I said to HR, hey, I need this person to start in 2 weeks. It was kind of unfair of me. Look at what HR has to coordinate, and they are responsible for driving this process. And the other key is they don't own all aspects of this process, yet it reflects negatively on them if they don't do it well.
Very true.
This is a best practices onboarding architecture. Don't try to squint and see it. It's sort of purposely obscured because I want to explain it to you high level. I've heard about this problem so many times, and with my CIO hat on and my experience with employee systems, all different kinds, and the systems that a company has to manage overall, identity management like Active Directory, you know, Microsoft or Google or whatever your infrastructure is. I have built a best practices onboarding architecture. There are little mistakes you could make in setting up your automation that could make automating onboarding a mess. For example, don't start creating service tickets when you learn that John Mancini is starting on Monday. Create the proper account name for John Mancini in your IDM, identity management system, first. Then create tickets under John Mancini so that they are connected and always connected to him. And I know this sounds like a simple thing, but up front, it's very easy to say, we'll just go create the tickets first. It creates a mess. There's a lot of other suggestions like that in here, as far as deploying the laptop and the accounts and so forth. As far as when is the right time to kick off that process within the automation, how many bots should be working on this? And we've also covered other things outside the automation, like the employee arrival and how you tie together the digital workers process, which he or she completes, you know, in the onboarding. What about how do we handle the human and connect them to all those things when they are done? So we've got a best practices methodology for this that's both technical and also very practical and, you know, human-centered.
And Heather, these aren't typically one bot solutions, right? These are multiple processes that run, maybe in a serial, sometimes in a parallel fashion. So it's not everything fitting into one. Maybe 3-4 bots for onboarding, somewhere around there. It all depends on what systems are involved. Don't think of it as one. We don't want our participants to think about this as one fix or one process that solves everything. There's multiple steps that we use to get through these business needs.
No, thanks for pointing that out, Scott. And in this case, you'll see that we've got 2 bots. And what drives the need for 1 or 2 or 4? Remember what I said up front when I was describing how bots work. It is a software license. It can transact 24/7. When do you need a new software license? Either when there's so much volume, let's say we're onboarding 2,000 people every Monday, we're going to need another software license. Or like you said, Scott, we have parallel tasking. While this is happening, this thing over here has to happen because the departments that pick it up from there need it at a certain time. So the number of bots that you use and when is definitely important. I knew I had my wingman here for a reason.
Every now and I get one right.
All right, I am going to show you an automation. I'm not going to play the whole video because it's 4 minutes. I'm just going to kind of walk you through what you're looking at. This is an interface where a bot is doing the work. So when I was explaining up front about swivel chair and all of that, this bot is logging in just like a human is. So Jenny is an HR manager who needs to onboard a new employee. And let's watch what happens here. So here is the bot that gets kicked off. We've selected the employee onboarding process, and the candidate ID is getting entered by the bot. It's pulling it from a list of candidates that are starting Monday. In this case, they're using JobVite. And they haven't found the candidate ID. And so they are entering the ID. Now they're retrieving all the candidate details from the recruiting system. In this case, it was JobVite. And Brass Ring, there's all kinds of different systems that are used for that. The data about the candidates being extracted and structured. Now we've got the details in the HR system about the candidate. And this happens instantly. This is looking slow. By now, there would have been 15 done. 0% errors, unless, of course, JobVite had some errors. Like if the name isn't correct in JobVite, it wouldn't be correct here. And there are ways to have the bot look for those errors and flag them. And now the IT manager needs to go in and create the account. So envision that a ticket was submitted at the right time, as we explained earlier. A notification, let's say in ServiceNow, is provided, and the IT manager, can go and open that task. And IT tasks can all be automated as well, and they should. Account creation is easy to do. And again, this is a bot doing it, not a human. And you can have a human called human in the loop, where a human is watching this process and maybe providing feedback. Or if it can be automated from the start, then it's just programmed in. You can do it either way, and it really depends on how much human judgment is required. And then, the HR manager, the other processes are continuing, such as getting payroll started and getting benefits started. And Jenny, the HR manager, she's spending her time talking to candidates and getting them excited about working at that agency versus spending, manual time on inputting data.
Right. And that's that UI being used, like you said. These take not even a second to run in most cases. So if you have a list of tasks queued up, it's going to execute as fast as the bot can open windows and close them in sort of a desktop environment. So just huge time savings. But it's always a good example to walk through those so we can show what's actually going on what that bot is performing at the desktop level.
I'm going to remind you of what I said up front. The statistics are staggering. I encourage you to call us and give us your scenario. We have some very sophisticated calculators where if you tell us how many new hires do you have in a year, how many different departments are involved, it's going to be significant, even if you're a smaller agency. As I mentioned earlier, when we run the math on the total effort, it is staggering, and making that business case is easy. I probably just cursed it. No, but truly it is. Making the HR onboarding case is easy. And offboarding, by the way, is an easy case to make too. That's actually often supported by insurance requirements for municipalities, security. So you have to, when an employee leaves, shut down all their accounts instantly. And sometimes insurance policies often require them. So offboarding, which is actually a simpler bot, is also a very important one. We encourage you to call us to talk about that one as well. That was in the heat map up front.
Right, we haven't even touched on the audit trail this produces as well, right? If we're typically used to doing emails for hiring, sending the training center, hey, John Mancini's starting tomorrow. He needs to complete this course by 2 p.m. or we can't create his account. There's a whole audit trail there for each one of these tasks that are performed. And that's huge as well, too.
That's a great point. Again, think of Jenny in the scenario we just saw. Jenny's sitting back and she's getting a report from her digital employee every day about everything that was completed. Onboarded, 100 people, 25 completed their online learning. 25 did not, and therefore emails were sent, reminders. I mean, all this can be automated. Jenny has a digital employee to do the manual work. She can sit back and do something about, when employees are not getting their background check done or online learning done in time, rather than sit there and crunch the data about, what the employee has done and what they've not done. All right, let's, we have a question here about HR onboarding. Can this work with SuccessFactors? Yes, absolutely. SuccessFactors is a very common system that handles hiring, performance management, goal setting, compensation. We're very familiar with SuccessFactors and how to use bots. What screens the bots need to go into. And we're familiar with, most Workday. We're familiar with most of the HR systems out there. Great question.
There was another question I noticed, which was when you're talking about the 18 systems that a typical HR process uses, that means there's information lodged in all of those different systems in all of its different facets and documents and data and everything else. And the question had to do with, talk a little bit about, given that this is sensitive information often in an HR context, of the risks that people have when multiple people touch that information as opposed to systems doing it behind the scenes.
Yes. I actually have that covered in our next slide, John.
Okay, good.
Talking about PII, it'll fit in perfectly. Kind of hitting on the fact of when we have I'm comparing a workflow to an RPA tool and what the difference is there, accessing that information. So I think I can cover that in the next commercial customer call center case.
And keep those questions coming, please. They're really helpful.
Absolutely. This is for you, everyone out there. So please ask us questions. We welcome them. All right. We'll kick off this section like we did the last with a heat map. Here is a heat map for call center. This is the common things that are automated within call center. Multi-system tasks, issue handling, order queries. This is a top use case and, again, a very easy business case to make. If you think about your citizens that are calling in, waiting online for a long time because you don't have the resources to answer all those calls, and then once the call is answered by an agent, the amount of time the agent has to say, hold on, I'm pulling up your information. Hold on, I'm checking this other system. There are many different examples of where automating that. And a lot of times this is more of an operator assisted type automation where the agent has everything pop up immediately and can get to the the citizen's questions a lot faster. And I'm going to describe that in a minute. But there's other uses too within the call center scenario that you should look at with your teams. We're going to send you this deck after this session. Really encourage you to take these heat maps, set up a meeting room, order some donuts and look at all these, or apples, and look at all these use cases and see if there are problems for you and whether they could help you deliver better public service to your citizens.
Yeah, and just touching on the PII subject. So sometimes these platforms, as the question was alluding to, how do you control that? Well, if you talk about a comparison, maybe in the older days, not too long ago, we would build custom connectors and workflow solutions to go out and validate data against maybe, a SQL table or an Oracle table. When we're opening that data up to that workflow engine, we're actually displaying all the contents in a table, for example. But when we're using an RPA tool, it's working through a UI. So it's working through, let's say the Workday UI. It's only pulling the information that the user has rights to through the user interface. So we're not seeing the social security number, the date of birth. All we're seeing is an ID and maybe a last name, first name, just as an example. So being able to control that, not opening up an entire database to a process, we're really just using a UI interface to get that information from those other platforms. And I hope that answered that question, but it's something we wanted to touch on.
Thanks, Scott. And also bots aren't curious, right? There are
exactly. That's a good point. Yeah.
Go Google out there. I mean, there are many situations where an agency was held responsible for the exposure of data because some employee was curious and used that information in a unapproved manner. Bots are not curious, so that is a big plus on the security side when it comes to using automation. All right, so why do call center sales agents have challenges? Let's again put us back in that scenario I was describing. A citizen picks up the phone and calls. They need help with something. They wait online, probably for a while. They wait, on the phone. The agent finally answers and says, "May I have your ID or your address or your social security number or whatever?" And they say, "Please wait a moment." And in a typical scenario, there are at least 3 to 4 systems that have to be opened up to resolve a call for an agency from a citizen. Why? Many municipalities and states have legacy systems that are not integrated. And, this is an example of some of the systems they may be using in the background. All these systems have to be checked. And then once the resolution comes, the resolution has to be recorded in whatever system is used to record that resolution. Or the agent can't resolve it, and they've got to put it into some kind of ticketing system, take some notes, put in the ticketing system, forward it on to the person who can actually resolve it. The time spent opening systems and finding data is half the call. So if you just do the numbers on how many calls you get a day and the time savings and the happiness of the citizen, more importantly, imagine how happy they are when their call gets answered faster. Their information pops up immediately because the bot brings everything up that's needed, giving the agent a 360-degree view of the citizen and the systems that are needed to either look up the problem or record the solution to the problem.
Right. We're having a similar conversation about this exact same case. It's funny how it doesn't matter really what area you're working in. They're very similar as far as the challenges go. So in this case, it's a federal team who's challenged with it's a service, right? It's a service provided by a federal group. They get an ID number. The information for their client can be in maybe 6 different platforms. So each time a user is gathering that client ID, they're searching, they have to open up 6 different browser window shortcuts, enter the information to get the information for each one of those systems. Just a simple first step. You know, we talk about crawl, walk, and run. Crawling is getting the ID, having the bot open up all of those windows. They have 2, 3 monitors, and each one of those windows is up with all the client's information. And from there, we can make a business decision, whether that's human interaction or training everything, you know, training the bot to become more productive as we move along. But that scenario is so popular, not popular, it's so common, but very similar across the board with all these business challenges.
And we don't have a demo to show you of a customer service automation in the session today due to time. And we've got one more use case we want to go through with you, along with recommendations and best practices before we close. But I encourage you to call us. We love to show videos of automation so that you can see in action, what is that bot doing and how does that change what the human's doing? The ROI for customer service automation, as I said up front, is staggering. 30% savings potential on customer service costs in general, and particularly when you use chatbots. By the way, we have an amazing video we can show you of a chatbot that is so responsive to this county's website. It's unbelievable, and it uses AI. It's actually a chatbot that works and is useful, because a lot of them are not, and they're frustrating to us citizens out here. As John was pointing out earlier, you know, 75% of millennials expect customer service agents to know who they are and their purchase history. Well, if we have that bot go and if we think about where that information is, what's the one question we can ask the citizen up front to get that 360-degree view? The experience is night and day. 61% of customers who have stopped transacting with a business or agency because of poor experience, right? They just give up and they'll be mad. I'm never going to get an answer here. And, well, you know, then they vote, or, you know, the agency could get a bad reputation for that. And, you know, same for companies, they lose revenue when customers get frustrated. Companies with top net promoter scores grow revenue more than twice the speed of their peers. And that applies to agencies as well. When you have a great reputation, i.e. a citizen would say, yes, I would recommend that my neighbor call for this service. That's what how net promoter would apply here. You know, that leads to positive impact, which leads to funding. So really, you know, bottom line, tremendous bottom line impact for customer service automation. All right, let's go to supply chain. Again, let's start this with a heat map. We've got 3 categories of supply chain: order management, administration, and supplier and inventory management. And a lot of our, you know, municipalities and states are managing a supply chain of sorts. So we've got a use case that should, you know, be very relevant for our audience today. And just a, you know, little tidbit similar to the stats around HR and the fact that 80% of HR managers are looking to automate the onboarding process. Very similar for supply chain. As a matter of fact, because the manufacturing industry relies on supply chain so much, they are the first industry that started automating because of the tremendous number of use cases that exist and the tremendous impact that automating supply chain can have. And this applies to any municipality that has to manage inventory of any kind. There was a study done on supply chain challenges, and 89% of participants were going to look into supply chain planning for automation. 87% for sourcing and procurement. We know sourcing and procurement extremely well. The systems that are used to procure and the asset management problems that come from that, you will not find more knowledgeable professionals in that category, and it is a top target area for automation. Logistics and inventory management, top area for automation. Order management and product development, all top focus areas for supply chain last year for automation.
Yeah, and we know that in each one of these areas, supply chain, source, procurement, all of those have automation built into them in some capacity, but it works within that certain area. The challenge, like we're talking about here, is getting those to talk to each other. I think I mentioned that in the first case study, is being able to bridge those connections between each one of these stages, if you will, when you're going through the ordering process. So that's really the strength of the RPA platforms, to join those different platforms together and make them function as one group.
Let's go into a use case. This is an example of a manufacturing and distribution unit, a unit that has to distribute a lot of inventory. And in this scenario, they did not have enough inventory for large device deployments, which required a team to coordinate installation and the delivery of those devices. And the COVID supply chain issues exacerbated this problem, resulting in great dissatisfaction. And this was just a timing thing. In other words, if they knew the inventory and could just simply notify the right people, there could be just a tremendous positive reverberation effect and impact on the ultimate recipient. So in this case, a bot was built to search a report for the asset serial number, determine availability, and as soon as something was ready, notify the coordinator and start delivery preparations. Now, because this task had a lot of volume, it saved 9 people. There were 9 people across the country in different regions that were coordinating distribution for their region. You just think, oh, well, there's only one over here in the Southwest and one over here in the Northeast, if you happen to be a national, public service agency. Well, when you add up those people in the, that cover those different parts of the country, and most of our customers don't necessarily think about the math because they're so overwhelmed with the complaints or the process and the new volume that's expected. When we have amazing ROI calculation tools, and we do it very quickly. When we show them what it's actually taking and the resources that can be redeployed, they are shocked. And in this case, a 50% improvement in internal efficiency of the deployment process. And Scott, I'm sure there's, many, many analogies for our QA at DocPoint customers.
Oh, definitely. No question about it. And I wish we had more time to go into some of these other success stories, but we can always touch on those in future sessions, and we're always happy to talk to everyone about those and share that information. So always available.
Great. There was a question earlier, I'm sorry I missed it, about the service agent. Can a bot go into a homegrown system that an agency or state might have? Absolutely. Absolutely. If a human can log into that system, a bot can log into that system. So if you've got homegrown systems, whether it's in the customer service scenario or in this scenario right here, manufacturing and distribution, doesn't matter if it's custom. What matters is there an interface layer, an account that a human uses to get in, a bot can get into. And APIs, for those of you that are very technical in the audience, bots can work with APIs too. and speed the transmission of data between systems. All right, let's conclude with best practices. We're gonna send this to you, and this represents a lot of Scott and I have a ton of experience. This represents a lot of bumps and bruises, this table here. So I encourage you to, take it and use it in your daily life if you start deploying automation. Really think about how to avoid these issues. So basically we have avoid, and you've got the problem listed in the top. By, this is the thing you should do. Via, this is the method that you can use to avoid that problem. So let's go through them real quick. Something that typically happens when agencies deploy RPA, they miss service level agreements and there is production downtime. Now, earlier I told you that bots don't make mistakes. Well, then how could this be? It's because that agency this happens all the time when they just get started. They don't have technical development standards. They don't have a certain way that they want the automation code written consistently so that when the bot breaks or the automation, it can be easily troubleshot. Many different junior developers might develop those initial bots. And what we typically see is around the 8 or 9 bot level, the wheels start coming off the wagon a little bit because they were excited about automation. They rolled them out. They didn't have technical development standards. So, what do you do about that? You need technical development playbooks and run books. We have, I might be biased here, but we have what I feel are the best standards in the industry because we are platform agnostic. We work with all the vendors, and our automation professionals have worked in centers of excellence that have cranked out 900 bots a year. So our standards are based on the experiences of professionals who've worked in very high volume COs. So you need the technical development standards, the playbooks, run books. Try and do it right up front if you can. And don't go too long without it. And level 1, level 2 funded. What do I mean by that? We deploy a customer service bot, right? Beautiful bot. It's going to make citizens very happy. Service is going to go faster. The agent goes to use it, the bot breaks. In a high volume situation, that's going to get around very quickly. And if it can't be fixed quickly, the people who have to use the automation are going to lose faith. So you've got to fund level 1, meaning the agent can call and say, my automation's not working. And it needs to be something that can be, repaired immediately. It's kind of like 10 employees not showing up one day or 100 when an automation fails. So resolving, challenges with an automation failing are very important. And like I said, let's just build them well in the first place so that they're resilient and they don't break in production very often, which again is a sweet spot for us. Failure to scale and wasted licenses. This has happened to every customer I have ever talked to. Why? They don't ensure multi-department adoption. They don't build business alignment and support from the top. And I know that sounds very cliche, and you probably hear that about any initiative you ever try to learn about. And it's no different here with deploying intelligent automation. To avoid failure to scale, to avoid paying for licenses, like bot licenses that are sitting on the shelf. We have a process called Voice of the Business Alignment. Give us a call and we'll tell you about it. It is spot on for making sure that anything you're going to automate is going to resonate and be funded and get built quickly so that you don't have wasted licenses. And the other strategy around that is having a budget and planning the timing of automations being deployed. Like when you buy automation software, don't hire a bunch of developers out of the gate. Hire a business analyst first. Hire the developers a little bit later. Don't hire 3 developers if you don't have a pipeline of ideas yet. We have a best practices budget model. I'm a former Big Four And our budget model is, just as good as some of the fancy ones you might see from the Big Four, where we can go in and say, okay, here's a big picture plan on how big we want our digital workforce to be. And here's how we should time our investments. When should we buy licenses? When should we hire people? When should we make sure we deploy those automations so that we get enough return so that leaders who funded this effort don't lose faith? Really, really, really important concept. And we are very, very good at helping customers with that problem. Avoiding expensive software that doesn't produce. By properly vetting automation candidates, you want to avoid automating something that takes one person 1 hour a week. What if that bot takes a month to build? Is it worth it? We like to think in terms of what is the cost of the problem, and let's compare that to the cost of the solution. And sometimes that 1 hour a week is strategic and we should automate it, but we don't want to do that too often. As a matter of fact, we want to have minimum performance standards. Every bot should do an average of the work of 1.5 humans. How do I know that? Just from running that budget model over and over and over and over again. Given the cost of software, given the cost to maintain platforms, given the cost of development, in general, on average overall, the bot should do the work of 1.5 people. And as I said, you can go against that rule. Just don't do it too often. And when you do it, make sure it's a strategic use case. So how do you do that? Through lifecycle management built into your operating model, from cradle to grave. From the day we think of a bot, let's vet it. Let's make sure the cost of the problem is greater than the cost of the solution. Let's make sure voice of the agency, the leaders of the agencies, let's make sure that this problem that we're working on is going to resonate with the leaders of agencies. And let's have a dashboard of our digital workforce. That's another thing we'd love to cover with you directly. Give us a call or we'll cover in another session, is what does that dashboard look like? A dashboard that shows you the work that's being done by the digital workforce. Very, very important and very powerful for having your automation effort continue to get funded. And we've done many, many digital workforce dashboards and having, executive level views of them so that your program has street cred with your leaders.
So next we go to getting started, I would imagine.
Yeah, and we are going to definitely end so that everybody has time to take a break, get something to eat, make a phone call before your next meeting. We're going to wrap up here to give you that extra time before the top of the hour. But how do you get started? I've got a formula. It works every time.
Yeah, I mean, we see this mainly as, it all starts with analysis. You were mentioning that in the previous slide. We love the heat maps. It's a great visual and representation of what each individual task looks like. Color coding those makes them easy to read and to classify what you may want to address first as a simple type of task, and you compare those to the medium and more complex levels. So, but either way, those along with the process mapping documents. So, if you're drawing out what that business process looks like, maybe even the amount of time that's spent at each step, those are the tools that give you that ROI. Because Heather, as you were mentioning, we don't want to do onesie twosies all day long. It's not efficient. It's not a good use of your dollars. So those are the two things, process mapping, that we definitely want to address. So think of it as a crawl, walk, and run scenario. We don't want to come in and just tackle everything all at once and automate every single feature. We want to work through this and make sure we have a good foundation and a good candidate to automate.
Absolutely. And think of this in two parallel tracks. On the top track, find a big problem and build a bot in a couple days that fixes it. Plain and simple. And you have these use cases, I promise you. They're on the heat maps. And if, if we work with you, we can help you find them very quickly. It is shocking how many challenges agencies have that can actually be solved with a bot that was built in days. Build a bot for a problem that is large but simple, because we don't want the first automation to break when we release it. Make a nice marketing video of it. You evaluate it via an over-the-shoulder session. Do a go, no go, make sure the cost of the problem is greater than the cost of the solution. Do that fast, and it can be done quickly once all the contracting is done, of course. And then simultaneously build that long-term view. How do we identify the next 6 automations that we can do so that we get our money out of the automation platform that we purchase, and we don't have those wasted licenses that I was just talking about? We have very creative formats for running ideation sessions. They're really amazing. Very good at eliciting strategic ideas that help, departments within an agency get beyond anything that's blocking them, and that also resonate with leadership. Our ideation sessions are very sort of creative, web space, whiteboarding events that are professionally moderated. We also do botathons, which are really fun and shockingly jazz everybody up when we come on site and have this contest where business users and developers work together to quickly figure out some automations and build them over a 3-day session. And agency leaders judge those automations. And I'll tell you, there's always at least 1 or 2 that actually can go into production because they're such great ideas. It's a 3-day event that we run. And, coming up with a pipeline of ideas helps you build a larger business case and an automation vision. So 2 parallel tasks. Do this one quickly. Do this one in the background so that you've got a pipeline of ideas and you can get your effort funded. John, I'm going to hand it back to you. And I just want to thank everybody for their attention and their questions today.
Would urge everybody to contact these guys. It's a really fascinating subject, and I'd like to ask each of you just before we leave for one key takeaway you want to make sure that you stick in everybody's head. So Scott, why don't you go first, and then Heather, I'll give you the last word.
I hope I don't steal Heather's because we talk about this all the time, but a big takeaway for me is how do we define what RPA is? And we like to think of it as an assistant or an intern that helps you in your daily tasks. You wouldn't typically have an intern make major business decisions, and a bot doing the repetitive task doesn't do that. Now, if you go to a more complex conversation, can an intern be trained to make medium complex decisions? Yes, it can. In that case, they wouldn't be an intern anymore. But anyway, I think that's a great definition that the team has created. Think of it as an assistant in your daily tasks.
Heather, how about you?
He stole my thunder.
Oh.
But I've got another one. There's no future without a digital workforce.
Yeah.
When you look at what bots can do and the speed they can do them, we're on the road to ubiquitous adoption quite quickly. I mean, the adoption across state and federal agencies is mind-boggling. It is mind-boggling. We're going to do another session on that, on the research on who's adopting what and why, and use cases there. And by the way, thank you for that comment in the Q&A about us always bringing forth good use cases. We've got many, many more. We're just limited by time here, but that would be my big takeaway for everyone here today. There's no future without a digital workforce. So don't delay, and don't be afraid. Bots are not going to take your job.
And I lied. I'm going to have one other more point at the very end, which is that point that you made earlier, Heather, about a 10% standard error rate for repetitive processes is just sticking in my head, because when you think about processes at large scale, and then you do the math, you know, that is just a mind-blowing statistic. And so thank you for bringing that to the fore. Thank you both. Thank the audience. We really appreciate it. Again, if you have any questions, please do contact these guys. They are loaded with all sorts of information that's very, very helpful. And until the next time, we really appreciate your attendance, and we will see you on the next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.